Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Harold Campos and today I will be speaking about Logic Apps Hybrid, the new deployment model that allows customers to run Azure Logic Apps on premises on Arc-enabled Kubernetes clusters. For those of you not using Azure Logic Apps, it is a cloud and hybrid-based service for orchestrating AI workflows, integrating business processes, applications, and data across hybrid environments in a visual manner. This is a product that we will be talking about during this whole presentation. Now, Logic Apps Hybrid acknowledges that today's world is hybrid. So what we've done is we have incorporated the ability for our customers to have a new deployment model that will allow them to run on premises. With Logic Apps Hybrid, it comes also the need of running messaging systems or integrating with on-premises systems. So as we are not bringing the whole Azure Integration Services set of products to on-premises, we've enabled customers to integrate not only with IBM MQ, which is something that we've been doing for many years, but also we have added support for Confluent Kafka, for RabbitMQ, and for Apache ActiveMQ as well. So then for those customers needing to provide these patterns that will require messaging, such as Convoy, for instance, then they can use any of these platforms, messaging platforms on premises. So why Logic Apps Hybrid? I think there are many reasons, and we've been speaking with customers for many years about the need of running on-premises workloads, because I think it's fairly common for customers to state latency as one of the issues, right? I mean, if they have all of their systems running on premises, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have an integrator in the cloud, to deploy it in the cloud. So that's why local processing was essential for these customers, banking, insurance, and many other industries that have to also meet regulations, right? And with that, we get into also healthcare. Healthcare is one of those who, in many cases, cannot really go to the cloud. But when they can, then we provide Logic Apps Standard and BizTalk migration, which is an area that we will be focusing on as well, because BizTalk, as you know, it's been around for so many years. So then traditionally these BizTalk servers run on premises. Now, one thing to consider though is that Azure Hybrid has this mindset of Azure first deployments, which means that we advise you to use Logic Apps Hybrid when it's essential for you to run on premises, or even in other cloud, right? I think not an Azure cloud. Why? Because we make it very simple for you to run Logic Apps Standard in the cloud, and I think that's a benefit that you can leverage, because you don't have to configure infrastructure. We take care of those aspects for you, and so then we advise you to go and to take selective workloads on premises. Now, the benefit of using hybrid, another benefit of using hybrid is that you have unified management. So then you can manage hybrid Logic Apps and standard Logic Apps running in the cloud, both together from the portal. If you have a multi-cloud experience and you want to leverage all of our integration capabilities, you can implement your multi-cloud strategy, and then you can integrate from other clouds to other systems running in other clouds as well, right? I think this depends a lot on the proximity to your key line of business systems, and if you are an ISV, I think you might find this feature interesting as well. Now, expanding the discussion about beyond the general statements and the support on on-premises, private clouds, and public clouds, one aspect to emphasize is that hybrid deployment model has a different costing model. It has a different billing model. It charges. We charge for virtual per CPU, virtual CPU per hour. Right now it's $0.18, and so that's the cost today. And one more thing to mention is that it's Microsoft managed and customer managed Logic Apps from a single experience. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, you can run from both. You can run from the portal. You can manage any kind of Logic App because the control plane is in Azure and is accessing the data plane through Azure Arc. right? So the data plane is on premises. So that means that the logic apps are deployed into containers within a connected environment. Now, what is important to mention is that now this will lead us to the discussion of the runtime, the logic apps hybrid runtime. Where does it run? It runs on premises. It runs on your environment, so it will not stop running. And we will talk more about in the next few minutes. There are some hybrid concepts related to Logic Apps Hybrid. One is the connected cluster, which is an Azure projection of your Kubernetes infrastructure. We will be talking about the Kubernetes distributions that are supported today. Then are other elements like a cluster extension, a custom location, and a container apps connected environment, because in the end, as you can see in this graphic, your environment has to have this projection in the cloud that has to be managed by the control plane. So then there are some elements that will get installed or has to be installed. We do provide scripts for that, and I will be showing you those scripts as well, that will allow you to do these setup processes smoothly, and management process as well, and troubleshooting. Now let me show you the hybrid experience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to create a new logic app, right? So I'm going to go to my resource group. So let's hit create. So as you can see here, we have two big models, the consumption and the standard model. We advise our enterprise customers to use the standard model that has the workflow service plan, the app service environment v3, and the hybrid deployment model, which is the one that we recently introduced. So if I select this one, you will see that I have the ability to, well, I'm going to name it my hybrid my hybrid test, right? And I'm going to select here in Southeast Asia the region where I have deployed my extension and my where I have access to my environment through the Arc agent. So here's the thing, right? For this demonstration, I'm creating a Kubernetes. I have created a Kubernetes cluster that is running in this region, and it's running in the cloud, right? But because I don't have access to a Kubernetes cluster on premises right now, I will be creating one, and I will be showing a video how to with the steps on how to set up a Kubernetes cluster with a Logic Apps Hybrid on premises soon, right? But in the meantime, I wanted to show you the general capabilities of the model, right? So this connected environment that I created already, right? So we'll have access to the Kubernetes environment. So in this case, there are some requirements that have to be met, by the Kubernetes environment. We will talk about them briefly. And but in the meantime, what I do is I configure here the storage settings, and this is the first important point about hybrid. One is that I was talking about runtime, and that the runtime doesn't stop working. As you are aware today, with Logic Apps Standard, the runtime requires a blob storage account for managing, the execution of the workflows and everything. And as we don't have those on premises, so then what we use is SQL Server. So this brings a benefit, because you can manage your own SQL Server, whether it is in the Kubernetes cluster or outside the cluster, right? And you can make it, you can scale it as you want, right? So I think depending on your environment, you can customize it and increase the throughput and increase and make it as performant as you want. Now, for the connection string here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sample connection string that I have here, and then the host name. This is the other part, right? The other part is that there is an artifacts storage that is required. So you have the runtime with SQL Server that will be used in SQL Server, but we also have the artifacts storage that will where you will be placing all of your artifacts like rules, schemas, maps, assemblies, and all of that. So then I need a host here. Right? In this case, I have created a file share path as well. the user, the password, right? So let's see. Once I have all of these in place, then I do review and create, and then what's going to happen is that it's going to validate the resource group, the container app connected environment, the custom location, and that it has all of the information needed about the storage and for the artifacts and for the runtime, and then I hit create. Right. Once I do this, then what's going to happen is that it's going to look for the cluster, it's going to run the extension, it's going to do the whole work to setting up the deployment in my Kubernetes environment. So then once this is created, right? So let's wait for a bit for this deployment to finish, or let me do this. Let me open an existing one now. Once this happens, so then we will go to the portal and we'll take a look to the configuration of this logic app. But in the meantime, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you this. I'm going to go to this environment and I'm going to look for a logic app hybrid that has already been created. Let me take a look. Integrate 01. So I think this is the one, right? It's still deploying. Yeah, I mean, we'll deploy. So go to resource. So then we have both here, right? So this one is an existing one that has that already has workflows and it already has some artifacts, and then this is the other one that I created, right? It's still loading, so let's just give it some time to finish. So this is a logic app hybrid that is running in a Kubernetes environment. In this case, it's running in AKS in the cloud, of course. But in your case, when you deploy on premises, you will be running on premises. So then if I take this commercial agent, which is an agent loop workflow, so then you will see that I have my trigger, I have my prompt, right, for the agent, I have the tools, I have all of the activities, and I can run this. So let me see if I can run this, if I can submit the right parameters. For this commercial agent that is doing AI work from my Kubernetes environment. That is, as I said, it can be on premises, and then you can interact with any model that you might have. So this is it's still loading the runtime version and everything is deploying, and this is still running. So then we have an execution of a workflow here, but in the meantime, while this is being executed, let me go to the properties of the workflow. Right, you will see that you have schemas, you have maps, assemblies, all of the artifacts that you have in the cloud today. You have also the concept of revisions and replicas, which are basically elements that are part of your container app. They are snapshots, and they will reflect the status of your changes and everything. And there will always be one revision that is active, right? So you can see you can see here, right, that you may have multiple versions of it, but there has to be only one active, right? And let me go back here. So that's for revisions and replicas, and then for containers, you will see that you can set up the container information. You have an image tag, and you have the allocated resources that you can of course change, right, and edit and deploy. You have the environment variables available, right, and let me go back to my, it's still deploying, right, so let's hit refresh. And then you have secrets here as well. You can add secrets, and you can link them to Key Vault as well. Ingress configuration, scale, volumes. So I think as you can see, this resembles more an on-premises environment rather than a platform as a service, right? But yet it's still there, right? So let's just give it some time. Now, one thing to mention though is that going back to the presentation, is that there are differences between hybrid and the standard model. And how is hybrid different? Let's start with scalability, right? In scalability, we have that Akeda, it's an event-driven scaler, right? So it's external, it's open source, and the great thing about Keda is that it allows you to respond to events. Events can be sent, it can come from databases, from queues, and that's fantastic because as I showed you a few minutes ago, we have a lot of support for different messaging systems. So then there is this ability to react upon specific events to scale out environment, right? Depending on the peak and everything. Anyway, so we have a link here. We'll be providing all of these links in the video description, right, for you to take a look in our blog about how you can scale this environment using Keda scaling and creating the rules and everything. Now, something else that we have also is zip deploy. So what is this? Right, if you go to create a logic app from VS Code, you can you create a workspace, you create a logic app, right? And then when you want to deploy it, typically you go through the deployment process to go to deploy it to Azure, right? And you decide to what type of deployment is this, right? Model, and then you say it's hybrid, right? What's going to happen is that it will require an app registration with Entra, and then with that, the process will go smoothly to your environment, right? So it will bridge the environment, so then you don't have to use SMB locations or anything like that. That's something that we required in the past. So this makes it more straightforward or simpler to do, for customers who do active deployment from VS Code. Also, as I said as well, SQL for runtime storage, you can use a SQL storage provider instead of the Azure storage for workflow-related storage transactions. So this allows you running hybrid anywhere where you have your access to a SQL environment. It has flexibility and control over your workflows runtime, and it's in Logic Apps standard. Azure storage is still required for some connectors. So I think what is essential to understand is that there are some elements that running in standard depend on cloud infrastructure, right? So that's why we give you the ability to share the load between SQL and Azure storage in the cloud, but I will be talking about that at some other video. Now, something else that we have added on premises is support for open telemetry. Hotel is becoming the platform for observability, right? And customers are asking for it, and not only that, also the fact that we don't have app inside supports on premises, right? Requires us to provide an alternate way for customers to manage their logs and traces, and we implemented support for OpenTelemetry as well, which is something that we have in place, and you will get emails every time that you configure some events. You can use Grafana, you can use any other environment for hotel endpoint on premises, right? So then, as I said at the beginning, right, your data is not going to the cloud, it's not flowing to the cloud unless you want it to. So what about messaging? Messaging, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, it's essential for in the absence of service bus. So we don't have today's service bus on premises, which we provide support for service bus anyway. But we have the IBM MQ connector or service provider that allows Logic Apps hybrid and standard to integrate with IBM MQ systems. We support peak lock. We support destructive and non-destructive reads. You have sort of set of commit abort / abort for reads and picking up messages, and we have the same with also with RabbitMQ and with Kafka. With Kafka, we have the receive and send messages stored in Confluent Kafka. So we have this available as well, and it's in public preview. So we invite you to use this connector along with the RabbitMQ one, right? In the RabbitMQ, we also have the ability to do peak lock and to send messages, right? And I think what is essential to mention is that these are connectors that are also available in standard, right? So we build them for hybrid, but you can use them in Logic Apps standard as well. One very exciting area where we decided to focus was JMS, because we have a number of customers who are leaving other integration platforms, and they are requiring JMS integration, and we have created a JMS connector that is currently in private preview. So if you're interested, then I will be adding a link for interest for you to access it and test it in your own environment as well in the video. We have the auto acknowledgement, and we have added big log support, and you can send messages, right? And this is for me, this is a very an area of special interest, right? Because we've been working with the IBM MQ connector and Service Bus connector, which has been in part of the product for many years. We have huge configurations and huge customers running very large configurations, multi-million messages exchanges, very high throughput, and this is essential for us because we've been able to replicate experience in this connector. So we'd love to hear from you, and I will be sharing some links towards the end as well. Now, something that I wanted to clarify is, what does semi-connected mean, right? Because we talk about, so we are not providing Logic Apps Hybrid in a fully disconnected scenario, right? So then we say that the Arc experience, or the Arc enablement for Logic Apps in Logic Apps Hybrid, it provides semi-connected scenario support. So let's digest what this means, right? For connectors, built-in connectors work the same as Logic Apps standard, because they run in your compute, in customers' compute. Managed connectors require Azure connectivity, so then you have to be careful on the type of connector that you use, because if they are not built in and they are managed, the managed will have to go to the cloud, and you have to open ports, and you have to do things that may defeat the purpose, because you're trying to run on premises, right? Custom built-in connector are not available today. As far as networking, one of the great things is that you will inherit all of the Kubernetes networking configuration, the Kubernetes service level networking configuration. So then you don't really need to use VNets on premises unless you have to secure resources with the cloud, right? And I think that that's mentioned. For other services needs, peer VNets might be required. For triggers and actions, same as a standard, and for logs and traces, Open Telemetry is the solution. We are developing support for traces now. For logs, it's already available, right? So we should have the traces support very soon, in a matter of weeks. Something important is that during disconnection, the log data is cached locally and sent to Azure after reconnection, and that takes us to the disconnection topic. While this is not in our public docs, I think the disconnection in the case of hybrid has to be as a sort of emergency mode, right? Because you don't really want to remain disconnected for too long. There is support for up to a few days. I think the guidance says 24 hours or so, but you probably can support a little bit longer. And the reason why we don't advise you to run in this emergency mode, so to speak, is that because the control plane operations, the CRUD, are not available during disconnection, right? Because you don't have access to the portal. So then it's like the runtime will continue working, right? I mean, if you have a Logic app that is reading or using a trigger and then sending data on premises, so then that will continue working, right, if your Kubernetes environment is up and running. But you won't be able to go and make adjustments through the configuration and everything, because you don't have access to the portal. You can start and stop the Logic app from the local cluster using kubectl commands, but again, so that's why I call it emergency mode. We're exploring the feasibility of having something fully disconnected and running on disconnected operations in local, but that's still a bit early, and we will need to explore those scenarios with other customers. But again, I want to stress out that the runtime will continue working in case of disconnection from Azure. So what about performance? How do I manage performance in something like this, right? As you can imagine, right? Logic Apps Hybrid has different runtime for standards. We said so that it sits on a different environment and it runs on Kubernetes. So then you can configure your scale node pool the same way how you will do it in with Kubernetes. So then we provide that configuration from the portal, right? You can do that. A colleague of mine, Divya Shrey, she has put together a fantastic blog with some tests that she has run in as far as the scale, changing the replicas, the minimum, the maximum, and further information that you can use to do your own tests. I get asked from time to time the question, hey, send me the sizing and the costs, right? And to have an idea. But again, with integration, it's very hard to create a calculator using size of messages and using throughput and everything, because patterns are different, right? So every customer is different. Some customers, they are more data intensive. They do more data intensive operations. Some other customers, they do a lot of caching. Some other customers, they just do request response with the stateless operation. So I think that's why we advise customers to do their own performance testing, so then they can determine what's best for them and how much is it going to cost, because they can prorate the results, right? Now let's get to BizTalk Server. So how is this for BizTalk Server? For BizTalk Server, first of all, we have to say that we have not changed the support timeline. So I think what is important to mention is that BizTalk Server 2020 will be out of support after April 11, 2028. There is extended date for extended end date, but this is only for security updates. So that means that between April 2028 and April 2030, you will only receive security updates for critical issues, right? So that's not really mainstream support. So then we are advising customers, encouraging them to migrate to Logic Apps, and in that regard, we are working hard to make Logic Apps the best alternative for customers living BizTalk. This chart there are variations of this chart. I created one for Logic Apps Standard, and this one is for Hybrid. This one for Hybrid shows that there are elements that we provide in the blue boxes mostly that provides natively in Logic Apps, and that's why we say BizTalk to Logic Apps Hybrid and not to Azure Integration Services, because there are some Azure Integration Services that are unavailable on premises, and in fact you migrate BizTalk to Logic Apps. Yes, for specific patterns and further needs, you need other services, and we call that out. But again, so every single customer is different. That's why we create this table, and then we indicate what elements we advise for each one of these needs. For instance, for disaster recovery, you have Kubernetes Load Balancer, the Arc-enabled Kubernetes DR strategies as well. For the business rules, you have the Logic Apps Rules Engine, which is basically the same runtime that you have on premises, and along those lines, you will find that there is support for a number of elements that you might be using with your BizTalk configuration. There is work that you will need to do for sure by refactoring your solution, but think of this as not only I'm getting the same for what I have running, because you are doing a massive upgrade of your environment. This is actually a modernization. It will, while different patterns are implemented, patterns are implemented differently in Logic Apps, you will be able to gain a lot of benefits of migrating your workloads, because mainly you will be able to infuse AI naturally. That's something that you cannot do today with BizTalk environments easily. There is a survey for customers migrating from BizTalk to Logic Apps that I will be adding to the video description as well, so you can take a look and then fill it up. What resources are there available? We have this link that has our GitHub repo. We have a couple of scripts, one called environment setup and the other one called troubleshoot, right? So one is clearly, you can enter the information of your cluster, your environment, and then it will do all of the setup work for you, for your environment. The other one is for troubleshooting purposes, right? And And if you see here, right, so let me, if you see here the hybrid environment, right, so the PowerShell scripts are available here, right, and then you can take a look to them, but basically, you know, it does a lot of the work and checks on the configuration of your Kubernetes cluster and such, right? Now let me go back to the slides. We have a number of for prerequisites. You need any Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster. More information here. So if I hit the link, I get here, right, to the Azure Arc Jumpstart. That will show you the Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster. You have IKES, you have a Red Hat OpenShift, Elastic Kubernetes Service, Google Kubernetes Engine, Alibaba, Rancher, a colleague of mine, Praveen, he shared the blog for Rancher, and I've asked you to take a look to it. Kind, Micro, K8s, and so there are a lot of environments that are available for you to use, right? And then a SQL Server database and SMB file share somewhere closer to your runtime, for sure, right? A lot of information in our blogs that I will be sharing, as well as links. We have a number of supported regions for this. If you don't see your region here, let me know. Then depending on the scenario, the opportunity, your implementation, when you are implementing, so that we can look to work with the Arc team to enable it. Okay, so let me show you a few things, right? Hopefully the audio will work. Just a couple of cases. BizTalk to hybrid.
In this demo, we have an employee onboarding use case that was built in BizTalk Server, and we would like to move it to the Logic Apps hybrid deployment model. In this employee onboarding process, we will take BizTalk artifacts like maps, schemas, and .NET Framework custom code and run this solution in Logic Apps Standard, running on customer-managed infrastructure. Here we have a Logic Apps hybrid instance, and we can tell based upon the custom location and connected environment. In the left navigation panel, we will also discover some familiar menu items, including schemas, maps, and custom assemblies. In addition, we also have container settings that can be modified to meet our scaling needs. In our schemas folder, we will find XSD files from BizTalk. In the maps folder, we will find our XSLT file that also comes from BizTalk. Lastly, we have our custom .NET Framework assembly that will be called from our data transformation. Let's now head into our workflow to see our implementation. Our workflow will process employee change requests and will begin with an HTTP trigger. From there, we will call our data transformation map that was uploaded from BizTalk. Here we can also see the XML extension object metadata that will allow for the scripting functoid to find our custom assembly. After our data transformation, we will use the schema from BizTalk to validate our output message. We can also use the new XML parse with schema action that will allow us to use the XML elements in our Azure connectors. Historically, we would have had to use XPath statements to extract these values. We will now insert these values into Dataverse using that connector. Once we have completed communicating with Dataverse, we will send a response back to the caller. Let's now use Postman to send an XML request into our workflow. Notice our employee ID does not contain leading zeros. After our workflow runs, we can see that our employee ID now contains leading zeros, which is an indicator that our custom code was executed correctly. As we can see, our Dataverse instance has been updated successfully. Let's now go check out our run history to see exactly how our workflow executed all of the required steps. Much like Logic Apps that runs in Azure, we have full access to our audit trail. The difference is that this information is coming from the customer's SQL Server instead of Azure Storage. Here we can see all of the inputs and outputs, including the leading zeros being added to the employee ID field. That concludes our demo on using artifacts from BizTalk in Logic Apps hybrid deployment model.
So with that, there is another one. So let me show you this one too.
In this demo, we're going to create flight booking using Logic Apps Hybrid and the built-in SAP connector. The demo starts with requests being made from a web portal. This request payload contains JSON content and subsequently needs to be transformed to XML so that it can be sent to SAP. Once we have transformed this data, We will send the IDOC to SAP and then respond back to the caller indicating we have processed their request. Here we are in our hybrid logic app. We can identify that we are in a hybrid logic app as we can see a custom location and connected environment. Much like any standard logic app, we can see our different artifacts including schemas, maps, and assemblies. Within our schemas folder, we will have the related schema for our IDOC. Within our maps folder, we will find our map that will transform a JSON payload into XML, and within our assemblies folder, we will find the prerequisite SAP NCO DLLs. Let's now explore the workflow that will process our flight booking. Our process will start with an HTTP request, and we will pass that data to our data mapper transformation that will convert it from JSON to XML. From there, we send the transformed XML to SAP. Provided the execution is successful, we will send a positive acknowledgement back to the caller, otherwise we will respond with an error message. Let's take a quick look at the new data mapper UX experience that allows us to transform JSON to XML messages. This feature is currently in public preview. Let's now go ahead and send in a JSON request to our Logic app and see the result of processing in our Run History view. As we can see, our transaction was successful. Let's click into that instance to further explore. Much like we experience in the cloud, we can see our execution step by step, even though the underlying data is stored in our SQL Server database. Whether you choose to run your workloads in the cloud or on-premises, customers can expect a consistent, rich experience.
So, well, with that, I will be finishing this video. Thank you very much for the time. And if you have any questions, feel free to connect with me in LinkedIn or check on the video, drop them in the video or in X as well. I invite you to test hybrid, to use our features, and if you are migrating from BizTalk, don't wait and use hybrid. And again, if you have not subscribed to this video, to this channel, I invite you to subscribe. I publish a lot of cool videos, so thank you for your time.